Hi, I'm Claire.
Hi, I'm Maggie.
This is episode 3 of Majority 6440, Supreme Court edition. But before we get there, all three of us are getting ready to go back to school. And so thinking of that, what is the first thing that you go to eat that's a St. Louis specialty when you get back from college?
Mine would have to be the bread sliced bagels from not Panera, but the OG St. Louis Bread Company, specifically Cinnamon Crunch, because that's the best kind. That's my go-to.
For me, I love gooey butter cake. I like it from local shops. So the Daily Bread has great gooey butter cake. It comes in this massive circle that you can cut a slice, or they have bars of it. Fall time, they have pumpkin gooey butter cake, which is so great. But I have to say my honorable mention is Ted Drewes, because the concrete is always perfect.
Solid.
I'm a big fan of toasted raviolis. That is the first thing I go to because BC has the equivalent of them. I think they call it maybe fried ravioli or whatever. And I tried it one time and was bitterly disappointed. All right, so today we're going to talk about the Supreme Court. We're going to go over kind of the history of what we think is the most controversial aspects or things that people who are watching this may have seen. So blocking appointments, should they be lifetime appointments? Should they have term limits? And then Maggie's going to talk about the recent ruling on the Electoral College because that's kind of confusing, as most things with the Supreme Court are. But I'm going to take us all the way back to the late 1700s with my boy, John Adams. So he's going to get us started controversially, as usual, with J-Ads. But what happened was Adams got voted out of office. Thomas Jefferson's coming in, but there's all these federal court appointments that are happening. And Adams is a Federalist, and Thomas Jefferson is a Democratic Republican, and Adams went, guess what? I know there's literally 4 hours left of my presidency, but I'm going to fill every single court vacancy with people who will support my agenda and not yours. And these became the midnight appointments. Thomas Jefferson sued to try and get them taken back. Most of them did get taken back, but it really made his presidency a nightmare to start with because he couldn't get anything done. So that's our first instance of packing the courts or trying to block appointments in the Supreme Court. This continued with John Quincy Adams, so it runs in the family. He had a federal judgeship denied because he had already lost the election to Andrew Jackson, and the Senate decided that that Supreme Court seat should go, and that federal courtship should go to Andrew Jackson, so Andrew Jackson got to fill it. President Tyler is where we really get controversial because he had 3 different appointments and no election has happened yet. But the Senate decided to sit on all 3 of his nominees because they were hoping that Henry Clay would win, it would change the political party system, and then they could have the nominees that they wanted. Unfortunately, as most things in politics happen, what you expect to happen doesn't. President Polk ended up winning. So then Tyler's like, well, we're the same party. I should reappoint my judges. The Senate's like, you get 1. Then they sat on that one. So he had to reappoint another guy. He finally ended up getting 1 of his judges, but it was nowhere near what he should have. And Polk actually ended up appointing most of them, even though they had been Tyler's to fill. And so finally, we get past the Civil War. Andrew Johnson is now president because of Lincoln's assassination. And he was supposed to get to appoint judges. And instead, the Senate said, how about we shrink the court? So we're going to go from 10 justices, and then as they die, and you should get to appoint new ones, it's just actually going to shrink from 10 to 7. So Johnson never actually got to appoint any justices because the Senate wanted nothing to do with him. Now, all of those should sound familiar, because in the last year of Barack Obama's presidency, he tried to appoint Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court, and Senate Republicans said, it's an election year, you shouldn't get to fill it, you should wait till after the election. When Trump won, then Trump's nominee was put through the Supreme Court, and it was a political gamble that played off. A lot of people thought it was a new precedent and that Mitch McConnell was, doing something that had been undone. But as we can kind of see, political games with the Supreme Court have been happening since literally our second president. And that's just how politics is, as sucky as it is. They sit on Supreme Court nominees when they think they have a chance of affecting it one way or another. So that's kind of controversial. Let's talk about something else controversial, term limits or the lack thereof. Claire, take it away.
Why, thank you, Sophie. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about some pros and cons to current lifetime, unlimited term limits for justices on the Supreme Court. So let's start with the pros. So some of the pros with justices being appointed for a lifetime would be that the Supreme Court remains the independent body that it is. It's less of a political thing because, like presidents and other elected positions, they have the constant fear in their mind that, oh, if I make this decision, I'll lose this audience, or if I don't make this decision, I'll lose this audience, and they won't elect me into office next year. So having lifetime appointments keeps that as, kind of not something that occurs within the Supreme Court. And then let's say if we were to add term limits, I know one of the popular term limit suggestions would be 18 years. If term limits were added, let's say that justices couldn't serve past the age of 60, then you could see that there might be some incentives for, because not everyone is going to stop working at 60 and they might have to find another job. So then you can see companies and bureaucrats getting involved and saying, hey, if you make this decision while you're on the Supreme Court, then we'll give you a job after. So if there were term limits, that could be a possibility and money could become involved, bribery, lobbyists, all that stuff. And then, if term limits were introduced, it would just make things a lot more stressful kind of for the justices because they got to get in and out. They're not, they don't have a lifetime appointment to be able to make their decisions and grow over time, I guess is what some people were saying. This is all just based on multiple different sites that I've found pros and cons against lifetime appointments. And then lastly, there's just less pressure on the justices to, do what specific parties want, even though in reality, appointing Supreme Court justices is very much a partisan thing, as Sophie explained. And then now I'm going to get into some of the cons leading with that. So basically, without term limits, presidents are more inclined to appoint younger judges. So we're kind of discounting the fact that, oh, maybe someone who is 60 or 70 or something does have a good head on their shoulders and can make good decisions. But at the end of the day, that's kind of a double-edged sword because some people don't like the fact that Supreme Court justices are old. But then if you, are only appointing young judges, then you're not giving older judges a chance. Versus if we had term limits, then you could give older judges a chance because you could give, a 6-year-old and a 40-year-old the same ability. If they have a term limit, they'd be on the bench for the same exact amount of time. And then a clear, obvious thing is that, judges get old. People, as humans get older, they lose the stamina, they lose the mental capacity that they had when they were younger, and things like that, just losing, skills that you would want your Supreme Court justice to be sharp in making decisions and stuff like that. Also, because politics and party issues are so involved in Supreme Court, justices have incentive to either retire early or like Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg to wait out certain presidents. So that would not necessarily be a factor if term limits were involved. They wouldn't have to wait out, I should be retired now, but let me just sit here until we can get to a new president, nor would they have to say, let me retire now before the president switches. And and then with an older bench, like we had, decisions aren't going to necessarily reflect contemporary values of modern society all the time because, people are still having the mindset that they had when they were younger and it was a different generation. And then with lifetime appointments, bad judges can remain on the Supreme Court. Impeachment is very rare, but it's possible that, bad judges could remain. But if term limits are introduced, then maybe good judges wouldn't be able to remain on the Supreme Court. So there's definitely some equal balance on both sides. And it's definitely been a huge thing that's been in the media lately, and some other things that have been in the media are one of the recent Supreme Court decisions regarding the Electoral College, which Maggie can speak more about.
So in terms of the Electoral College, we all know it, our generation, as 2016, what happened? Hillary got the popular vote, Donald Trump got the Electoral College. We were a little too young in 2000 to understand what was going on between Al Gore and Bush. But on July 6th of this year, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously, which doesn't often happen, about these faithless electors, and they blocked this decision. So they enabled the national popular vote in interstate compact to kind of reign, and we supported that now. And it made me very excited to think, oh, they're deciding on something that helps the popular vote while hindering the Electoral College, which was made where we can go back to the Constitution and how we see our country and demographics and states very differently then. So basically what this decision did was it allowed states to have the power to require that their electors have to vote for the party's candidate for president, and they can punish these electors if they break the pledge to vote for the state's popular vote winner in the presidential elections. And so it also ruled that states can pass laws that require these electors to cast their votes in a manner that reflects the commitment to vote for the person that they promised to choose when they are nominated as the elector. So it really adds some more value and more regulation into an elector's role, which I think needed to happen. We needed to make it more specific and more accurate, because what was happening before was just the electors choosing. They had so much power that they shouldn't have the power to sway these elections. We should elect the person who should be elected, who gets the most vote, who has the most support.
So now we've got to the section called Real Talk, and all three of us would like to dedicate this Real Talk to our haters, which are courtesy of SurveyMonkey. Does that make us the squad now?
Low-key?
Yes.
What?
Let's go. Okay, so we ended our factual section talking about the Electoral College decision, and the other thing I want to talk about is in that ruling, or in that set of rulings, there was also a DACA case and an LGBT plus case. And several people have said that the court has actually outstepped its boundaries and is now legislating instead of doing their job, which is just upholding the rules. And I wanted to ask, first of all, I know Maggie's going to provide some background. So Maggie's going to provide background on cases. And then I also want to know, what do you think about that? Like, should the court be legislating? Is it a failure of the court that they have to do this? Is it a failure of our Senate and House and our legislative branch that the court has to step in? Where's the line? Is there a line? Take it away, Maggie.
So this summer we've seen a lot of court cases, and I've liked them. And I think that's because we're living in such a strange time. Donald Trump constantly threatens us and our democracy. And so the Supreme Court is using the checks and balances that it does have to provide some protection. For instance, in July, the Supreme Court announced that DACA is protected, that it ordered the administration to start accepting new DACA applications. And for those who don't know, DACA is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals started by Barack Obama, and it has allowed hundreds of thousands of immigrants who came here at a very young age, and the United States is all that they know, and they should have citizenship. Their parents do not, they do not, but they are given protection to be here. So this new ruling allows them to have to still have their status and stay in the country without the threat of deportation, because Donald Trump is constantly threatening that. So the Supreme Court said, let's have this ruling so that we can continue to maintain this. And then another ruling came with the LGBTQ plus movement, and that it extends the protections for workers who are in the LGBTQ plus community from discrimination. And when that ruling was passed, I thought to myself, wow, as someone in the queer community, like, you can still be impacted because of your sexual orientation or gender identity. And it's not protected. You're not protected by the law. Like, why in 2020, we still have these homophobic legislations? But the Supreme Court case ruled that we do have this protection, and it is the supreme law of the land that we can go to work and not be discriminated against. So it extends those protections to millions of workers nationwide. And what's cool about it is that it uses the language of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibited sexual discrimination, and it applies this discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And you know what the best part about this was? Guess who wrote the opinion? Neil Gorsuch, which was just like, whoa, it was a 6-3 decision.
I think that it is a failure on part of our Congress. That, you know, this, I'm also glad that both of these decisions, and including the Electoral College one, were made. But I do think that these are things that, you know, could be solved at a congressional level if only our Congress can get along. I also think I like the idea of having a Supreme Court. I like the idea of having a body responsible for checking the constitutionality is the word, of things that are passed through our government. I like checks and balances. Like, that's the epitome of America and the United States. And while that's like, I really like that aspect of it, I think the Supreme Court has become too much of a political game at this point. And I mean, you have Brett Kavanaugh and Clarence Thomas. Like, I don't want to say it's a boys' club because there are women on the Supreme Court, but it's generally the sense of, you know, appointing Supreme Court justices, the Supreme Court justice in general, is a boys' club. Look back in history, it's a boys' club, and now you have 2 sexual assaultists on the Supreme Court. So it's like.
And what's really interesting about that is that as much as people claim that they're legislating and they're making these progressive decisions that don't reflect what the Constitution was, it's that the makeup of the Supreme Court up until really the Obama appointees, and even after, because there's still, 6 men on the Supreme Court, it's still very much an older, kind of not representative of what America looks like today. Mm-hmm. And they're making these decisions that people are saying aren't American, but also how many leftists are mad about the ruling on the Second Amendment and how we think that if you're going to be traditional, then you have to read militia as traditional. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, and you win some and you lose some. But Claire brought up term limits. Once again, there's a great case. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, love her, hate her, fall somewhere in between. She's really probably only still on there because Donald Trump is still president.
Oh, for sure.
So my question is, should she be the reason that we institute term limits? Should there be a law that prohibits Congress from blocking a Supreme Court nominee X amount of days from an election? Because maybe if Merrick Garland had gotten through, she would have retired earlier. Is there a solution, or is this just going to always be that the hopes of the right or the left depends on how long their chosen justice can remain alive and coherent enough to stay on the court?
So I actually found out a little bit about this in my researching of term limits. And like I said before in the video, the most popular term limit suggestion is 18 years. And the way that they would do it is they would stagger appointees so that every president would get at least one appointee. I believe 2 in some cases, but at least 1. So that would be one way of making sure, because this is America. I mean, we got Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican. Like, it's just going to be a pattern eventually. And like that all falls within, you know, the faults of having a 2-party system. But I do like the idea of giving every president the ability to do that, to where it's not just a game, and it's not just a, can I get this through, or can I have Mitch McConnell block this for me and have it work? Because like right now, I know, Maggie, we were talking about this earlier, like if John Roberts were to die, or just anyone on the Supreme Court were to die, like it's frenzy. It's everyone's freaking out because we don't get the opportunity to appoint these people that often, and when we do, it's just an all-out battle. So that's my view.
So as we know, the Constitution does not have everything that we need to know about our government, especially right now with our country. However, it is. And that's why we have amendments, and that's why we have the Supreme Court rulings. And so I would say that what Mitch McConnell did with Merrick Garland should not have happened. And now that it has happened, we need some legislation in place. We need some precedent. And so that needs to happen, whether that's an amendment, probably more so legislation, or a SCOTUS ruling.
So to get us even more fired up, hypothetically, a justice dies tomorrow, what right does Mitch McConnell have and President Trump to appoint someone, given what happened the last time, given that we're almost under 90 days to an election?
He does the same thing. He sits on the nominee because that's what's fair. what he will try to, like, he would try to proceed and be like, no, I can do this. And I have all the faith in the world that hopefully the Democrats would be like, nah, you did this to us, now it's our time to do it to you.
Yeah, I agree. Does he have the right to do that? I mean, that's a matter of governmental, deep bureaucratic papers that we got to look at. But would he do that? Yes. Like I have no doubt in my mind that that would be something that he would push.
Speaking of papers and his stack of bills that he is just sitting on, I think at one point it's like 250 plus bills that he is just sitting on that the House has passed.
I think the other thing that we all are loath to mention is the fact that a Supreme Court nominee or a Supreme Court justice dying tomorrow would radically change this election, because right now it's all coronavirus and COVID that's motivating people one way or another to see a change in leadership. But if the courts are in play, I mean, the courts were in play in 2016 and we know how that ended. Speaking of superstition, being obnoxious, having haters, our intro today was from the Blues Enterprise Center. They started playoff hockey today for the second time in 2 years, LGB. What is your favorite moment where you kind of got to be that obnoxious Blues fan or just got to fully rep your hometown team, either in the city or elsewhere?
So I've never been to a Blues game. I really want to go to a Blues game, but I've never been. But I have a bunch of Blues gear, of course, I have to. So I go to school in Chicago, so of course, not in Blues territory by any means. So I walked in the dining hall one day, and the person who was swiping me in said, "Congratulations," because I was wearing a Blues shirt, so I was still in school when the Blues won the Stanley Cup Finals. But having a native Chicagoan say congratulations to me, I'm like, of course I had nothing to do with the win, but it's like, yeah, congratulate me, because like that's my city, that's my team. That was a good moment.
So I also don't go to college in St. Louis. I go to school in Massachusetts, close to Boston, and I was an incoming freshman and at orientation right after they won. And Claire, that reminds me, people would ask me where I'm from. And being in a sea of Massachusetts people, I would say St. Louis, and they'd be like, oh my goodness, congrats. Like, we're already off to a rough start, but like, congrats. But in preparation of going, I went to the airport to like go to orientation. And they had just won, and they were selling all these Blues gear, like Stanley Cup, everything. It was great. And I wore that shirt to Boston. And even like the moment we touched down in Boston, I get off the plane and just stares, looks like typical Boston, what you think is what you get. So it was a little frightening. I was a little uncomfortable, but nevertheless, very proud.
I go to school in Boston, technically right outside, but and I do have a death wish. I went to TD Garden wearing a Blues hat. That was not the smartest moment of my life. We got kicked out right in March, coming home from coronavirus, and I had my Blues shirt on, and we were playing street hockey, and I had a St. Louis flag wrapped around. That was my goalie glove, and all of these Boston fans are right there, and everybody's screaming and running around, and I'm playing Gloria. We played that for probably an hour, and it wasn't me. Like, it must have been Gloria just turned me into Jordan Bennington, because no shots were made during that hour, and the Bruins fans were very mad because I said, oh, if you guys score, then we can change the music, and we literally listened to Gloria for an hour. So here's hoping we'll all be back in school when the Blues are back in the Stanley Cup. Here's hoping we win again. Maybe not. Maggie, you and I might die. Claire, if they face the Blackhawks again, you might die.
They should change their name before they are allowed into the Stanley Cup playoffs, but.
All right, well, this has been a nightmare of a Majority 64 episode. If you've stuck with us this long, hopefully it is the mood, Claire. Hopefully all the bloopers are edited out, and this is actually a streamlined, cohesive episode.
Sun is setting. We are good.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. See you around next time. Bye.